One day you may look around and realize nobody is coming. No friend, no rescue, no second chance. No one cares enough to save you. And here's the part nobody tells you. That may be the best thing that ever happens to you. Because when you finally have nobody left to depend on, you discover whether you were ever strong or simply supported. And if you're going through a season where people are disappearing, opportunities are collapsing, and you're being forced to handle everything alone, don't click away. Because the most dangerous mistake you can make is believing that loneliness means you've been abandoned. Sometimes, it means you're being separated from the version of yourself that needed everyone. And the final lesson will explain why some people become stronger after losing everything, while others never recover. There is a moment in life that changes you. Not when you gain everything. When you lose the things you thought you couldn't live without. The friend who stopped answering. The person who promised they'd stay. The opportunity that disappeared. The support you expected. The people who were around when everything was easy suddenly become invisible when things get difficult. And at first you ask, why is nobody here for me? But eventually, a more powerful question appears. Why was I expecting them to be? That question changes everything. Because dependence doesn't always look weak. Sometimes it looks like friendship. Sometimes it looks like love. Sometimes it looks like loyalty. Sometimes it even looks like hope. But if your ability to move forward depends entirely on somebody else showing up, then they don't just have a place in your life. They have control over your life. And that's dangerous, because people change. People leave. People disappoint. People get busy. People choose themselves. And sometimes, you are simply left standing alone. But that's only where the real lesson begins. Stop here and think about this. If everyone disappeared from your life tomorrow, would you still know who you are? Would you still know what you're building? Would you still have the discipline to continue? Or would your entire identity collapse with the people around you? Because that's the real test. Human beings naturally seek belonging. We want approval. We want reassurance. We want someone saying, "Don't worry, I've got you." And there's nothing wrong with that. The danger begins when your mind learns, "I cannot be okay unless someone else makes me okay." Now you've created a psychological dependency. You don't just enjoy someone's presence. You require it. You don't just appreciate approval. You need it. You don't just want support. You become afraid to move without it. And suddenly, your confidence is rented from other people. That's why some people become terrified of being alone. Because silence forces them to hear thoughts they've been avoiding. But here's what Stoicism teaches. You can appreciate people without making them responsible for your peace. You can love people without surrendering your identity. You can accept help without becoming helpless. That's self-mastery. And once you understand this, solitude stops being something you fear. It becomes something you can use. Imagine someone who spent years being available for everyone. Whenever someone needed help, he showed up. Whenever someone needed advice, he listened. Whenever someone was struggling, he stayed. Then one day his own life collapsed. He called the people he'd spent years helping. One didn't answer. Another was too busy. Another disappeared completely. And for the first time, he experienced the silence he'd never allowed himself to experience. He felt betrayed, angry, forgotten. But months later, something unexpected happened. He stopped asking, "Why didn't they save me?" and started asking, "Why did I believe they were responsible for saving me?" That question rebuilt him. Because sometimes the person you're angry at for abandoning you was never supposed to carry the weight you placed on them. And sometimes what feels like rejection is actually an invitation to develop independence. But there's an even darker truth. Some people don't want you independent. Think carefully. When you're dependent on someone, they have influence over you. If you need their approval, their opinion matters more. If you need their money, their conditions matter more. If you need their attention, their silence becomes punishment. If you need their friendship, you may tolerate disrespect just to keep it. And this is where people lose themselves. They say, "I don't want to lose them, so they lose themselves instead. They stay quiet. They accept disrespect. They abandon their boundaries. They become someone they're not, all because they're terrified of standing alone. Machiavelli understood something about power. The person who controls your options can influence your decisions. Stoicism takes that lesson inward. The more things you believe you must have, the more things can control you. So ask yourself, what could someone take away from you that would completely destroy your identity? Your money? Your relationship? Your reputation? Your friends? Your status? If the answer is anything outside yourself, that's where your work begins. Maybe you've already learned this the painful way. Maybe you stayed in a friendship because you were afraid of being alone. Maybe you tolerated disrespect because you didn't want to start over. Maybe you kept chasing someone who had already shown you they didn't value you. And perhaps you blamed yourself. You thought, what's wrong with me? But maybe the better question is, why did I abandon myself just to keep someone else? Read that again. Because losing someone hurts. But losing yourself trying to keep them costs far more. Listen carefully. This is where the entire philosophy changes. The goal isn't to become someone who needs nobody. That's not strength. The goal is to become someone who can say, I value you, I love you, I appreciate you, but I will not destroy myself to keep you. That's power. So how do you actually build this kind of strength? First, build competence. Learn skills. Manage your money. Improve your health. Develop your communication. Become useful. The more capable you become, the less fragile your life becomes. Second, practice doing difficult things alone. Go somewhere alone. Work without applause. Keep promises to yourself when nobody knows. Train your discipline privately. Because every time you prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort, your self-trust grows. Third, stop explaining yourself to everyone. You don't need everyone to understand your decisions. You need to understand them. Fourth, build relationships from abundance, not desperation. Don't ask, who can complete me? Ask, who can walk beside me while I continue building myself? That's a completely different relationship. But now comes the trap. And this is where many people who discover Stoicism get it completely wrong. They experience betrayal, then decide, I don't need anybody. They become cold, suspicious, emotionally unavailable. They call it strength. But underneath it, sometimes it's just pain wearing armor. Don't turn independence into isolation. A wounded person says, I need nobody. A dependent person says, I need everybody. A strong person says, I can stand alone, but I choose who stands beside me. That's the difference. A Stoic doesn't reject relationships. He rejects slavery to relationships. He doesn't refuse help. He refuses helplessness. He doesn't avoid love. He avoids losing himself inside love. He doesn't fear being alone. But he doesn't worship loneliness either. Because the purpose of becoming strong isn't to build higher walls. It's to build a stronger foundation. So when people enter your life, you don't cling. When people leave, you don't collapse. Now look at your own life. Think about the person whose absence hurts you most. The person you wish would call. The person you wish would apologize. The person you wish would finally understand your value. Now ask yourself something uncomfortable. If they came back tomorrow, would you actually be stronger? Or would you simply become dependent on them again? This is the heart of Stoicism. You don't control who stays. You don't control who leaves. You don't control what people think. You don't control whether someone appreciates you. You don't control whether life is fair. But you control your response. And that tiny territory is where your freedom lives. Epictetus taught the Stoic distinction between what is within our control and what isn't. That distinction can completely change your life. Because every minute you spend trying to control someone else's behavior is a minute you aren't controlling yourself. Every minute you spend begging someone to value you is a minute you could spend becoming valuable to yourself. Every minute you spend asking why they left is a minute you could spend building the person who no longer needs their return. Your freedom begins where your obsession with controlling others ends. Remember the question from the beginning? What happens when nobody comes? Now you know. You discover whether your strength was real, or whether it depended on the people around you. And if you're in that season right now, don't waste it, because there is something you can build in solitude that comfort could never teach you. No friends, no help, no excuses. Not because you should hate people, not because you should become heartless, not because you should pretend you don't need love, but because there comes a point when you must stop waiting for permission to become who you were capable of becoming all along. Nobody is coming to build your discipline. Nobody is coming to fix your mindset. Nobody is coming to live your life for you. And strangely, that's not depressing. That's freedom. Because if your life is your responsibility, then your future is also in your hands. The moment you stop waiting for rescue, you become dangerous to the circumstances that were keeping you weak. Remember these 4 lines. Stand alone without becoming lonely. Accept help without becoming dependent. Love people without abandoning yourself. And most importantly, never give another person so much power that their absence destroys your identity. The king isn't the person surrounded by hundreds. The king is the person who can walk into an empty room and still know exactly who he is. If you're building that kind of mind, subscribe for more Stoicism, psychology, self-mastery, and philosophy. And remember the first thing I told you. One day you may look around and realize nobody is coming. Don't fear that moment, because when nobody comes, you finally discover whether you were merely supported or whether you learned how to stand. And once you learn to stand, you are no longer waiting for someone to save you.